Mark Banning's office was not large, but it was the best he could afford. It was basically 2 rooms on the ground floor of an old Perry Hall bungalow, badly in need of a good paint job. But that wasn't his outlook. It was the responsibility of his landlord, and if that worthy didn't see fit to hire a painter, or better yet protect it with siding, there was nothing Banning could do about it. He paid his rent on time. Mostly. Kept the interiors of the offices neat. Mostly. And that's all that was required. Mostly. His office was the larger of the 2, with a nice-sized desk, credenza with 4-function device, file cabinet, a couple of chairs, and a couch for customers. None of the furniture was new, but it was serviceable and clean. He was 6 foot, trim and muscular without bulk. His hair had been brown, but had darkened a year or 2 before as he had turned 30. Betsy Connors held down the outer waiting room. She was short, with auburn hair, and a perpetual light tan. She was quick and efficient, and if pressed, he would admit he had a thing for her. Not because she was quick and efficient, but because, well, you get the idea. Business had been fairly good lately. He had just that morning turned over evidence he had gathered on an adultery case. He didn't like that kind too much, but he liked adultery even less. When he decided to tie the knot, whether it was with Betsy or someone else, he was going to do it forever. Today had been less than slow. No one had come in. No cases were pending. There was nothing work-related to do. He was reading the latest Clancy when he heard the outer door open. There was a murmur of voices for a moment, and a knock at his door. "Yes, Betsy?" Betsy opened the door about a foot or so. "There's a Mrs. Hammond here to see you," she said. Mark closed his novel and put it in a drawer. "Good. Show her in." Mark rose as Betsy ushered in Mrs. Hammond. He shook her hand, waved her to a seat, and sat behind his desk. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Hammond?" He hoped it wasn't another adultery case.
"Mr. Banning, I don't know if you recognize my name or face. I'm Diedre Hammond."
"You do look familiar," he said with a thoughtful frown.
"Perhaps if I gave you my full name. Diedre Rogers Hammond."
Rogers. That name rang a bell. So did the nickname that had been associated with her in the news, Dee Dee. "Are you Sam Rogers' sister?"
"I am."
"Yes. Now I remember you. From the news, at the time of the trial."
"That's right. Then you must remember that we all maintained Sam's innocence throughout the trial, and even just before his execution."
"Yes. And if your brother was indeed innocent, I'm very sorry. Sometimes our legal system grinds the wrong way, and the wrong person pays for a crime."
"My brother was innocent. I know he couldn't possibly have raped and murdered a 7-year-old girl."
Mark nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry this happened to you, but I don't understand why you came to me."
"When Sam was in prison, we tried several times to appeal the case. Each time it was turned down. We wanted his attorney to appeal to the Supreme Court itself, but after 3 tries in other courts, he gave up. The problem was, the police were satisfied that Sam was guilty and had closed the case. They refused to search for any new evidence."
"Do you believe there is evidence that would have proven your brother not guilty?"
"Yes, if they had kept looking and found the man who really did this horrible thing, Sam wouldn't have had to die."
"Had you thought of hiring a private detective while your brother was in prison?"
"We wanted to, but couldn't afford it. The legal bills were eating up most of our money. When Sam died, a trust fund that was in his name was transferred to me through his will. I want to use that money to clear his name, and more importantly, find the animal who really hurt and killed that little girl."
"I'm not that familiar with the case, but I have a friend on the force. I can talk with him, get some idea of just what evidence they had against him, and see if there's anything they may have forgotten."
"Thank you, Mr. Banning. I'm glad you'll take the case."
She started to reach into her pocketbook. She retrieved a pen, and he knew a checkbook was about to follow. "You can give your check to Miss Connors out front. She'll explain our fee schedule and terms." Mrs. Hammond smiled.
"Thank you, Mr. Banning. Thank you again."